Hi, this is Bastiaan, and this is the annotation of a game against the FIDE master using a variation of the King's Gambit called the Wild Bertin Gambit of the Cunningham Defense, also called the 3 Pawns Gambit. Now, contrary to the last few club games I posted, you will see that the level of play in this game is a little bit higher. So let's start the game. E4, E5, F4, signaling the King's Gambit. Pawn takes pawn, so the King's Gambit is accepted. Knight to F3, and Bishop to E7. And Bishop to E7 signals the Cunningham Defense. So I continue normally, following the book moves with Bishop to C4, targeting the weak square on F7. And Black plays Bishop to H4 check. Now, there are other variations. The modern Cunningham continues with Knight to F6, E5 attacking the knight, then Knight to G4. But this wasn't played here. Bishop to H4 check was played. And again, there are a few possibilities. I can simply play King to F1, so giving up my right to castle. Or I can play G3, a move that was played, which is called the Bertrand Gambit. Black takes the pawn, and I castle, which is the Wild Bertrand Gambit or the 3 Pawns Gambit. This allows Black to take my pawn on H2. Now, if pawn takes pawn was played, we get the Wild Bertrand Gambit accepted. I could continue with King to H1, which is the book move. But there are other possibilities. I could also play Knight takes pawn on H2, and we can immediately see that there are a lot of complications now for Black. We can see the bishop attacking the weak F7 square, we can see the rook attacking the F7 square, and at some point we may even play Queen to H5, check perhaps, or adding pressure to the F7 square with an attack on the bishop on F4. So instead of completing the 3-pawn gambit, Black plays an in-between move, which is Queen to E7. Now, the Queen still protects the bishop on H4, which is under attack by the knight, and it also adds a defender to the F7 square. So I take on F7 anyways. Black now has the choice if he wants to recapture with the king or the queen. He recaptures with the queen, which is best. And I grab the bishop on H4 with tempo. Now, of course, the queen becomes under attack. If Black would have recaptured with the king, we would have had a check. So it's a strong attack in either case for white. Black grabs the pawn on H2, in a way completing the 3-pawn gambit, and I recapture the pawn. So we can see now that my king on H2 is completely exposed. So the nearest pawn is all the way at E4 and D2, so there's little protection now for my king. Black needs a way to defend his queen. So let's say if Queen to C4 was played. This move wasn't played, but then we will see what complications have arisen for Black. At that point, White can simply play Queen to H5 check, and it's no longer possible for Black to retreat his queen to say F7 to defend, because there are too many attackers on that square. This could lead to King to D8, then Rook to F8 check, King to E7, then possibly Rook takes the bishop. Stronger still would have been Rook to E8 check to drive out the enemy king. King to D6 and so forth. And we can see that black has a lost game. So simply moving the queen out of the way without thinking about it is a bad move. Basically the only good move for black to play is to defend with knight to F6. And this seems like a poor defense at first, because I can simply play E5, adding pressure to the knight, and then if the knight moves I can get a free queen. But this defense works because black can play the move queen to H5, attacking my knight with check and tempo, forcing me to take on the queen. And now black can recapture my queen without danger of losing the knight. And this looks like solid play for black. After all, he's up a pawn. He has two passed pawns on a G and H file, but we can see the downside. Even though he has a material advantage, I still have enough pieces left to attack his king. His king is a little bit more exposed than my king, a little bit more accessible for my pieces, and I will need to develop quickly in order to attack black's king before black develops his pieces. Black will have a slower strategy where he will try to promote perhaps his two passed pawns. So although maybe black is a little bit better with material, it will be very hard for him to defend against my attacks. So I continue immediately, developing first with knight to C3. And we can see a problem for black if he wants to mirror my moves. Let's say if he develops as well with knight to C6, I can play knight to B5 and immediately attack the C7 square, attacking black's king with a fork against the rook. So if king to D8 would be played, I can continue with D4, protected by the knight, and opening up lines for my bishop with check. So we can already see that white still has an attack going with quick development. So after knight to C6, black plays a different move. He plays rook to F8. And this move makes perfect sense, because black wants to try to protect his king, and he will try to do that by exchanging the rooks on the open files, which means black's king will be less unsafe. Also, with the more material gone, the pawn advantage will become more important. I will have less and less pieces to protect against the pawn advance. So I take on the rook, black recaptures. Now I was thinking about playing B5 to continue development, but I played B3 instead. Reason why is this allows activation of my bishop and rook at the same time. Also, we can see that I can develop my bishop with tempo anyways, attacking the king with check. So B3 has the advantage. Knight to F4, so black swings his knight back into the action. Bishop A3 check, king to G8, going moving into safety after the pawns and protecting the pawns. Rook to F1, rook to the open file, attacking the knight. Knight moves to E6. Knight to D5, attacking the pawn on C7. It's currently protected by the knight. And now we can see black has a lot of problems. Let's say if the following move was played: G5, pushing the pawn in order to promote with tempo, attacking the knight. And black doesn't worry about the attack on C7 because he's protecting with the knight. Now this move wasn't played. If this was played, I could simply grab the pawn, attacking the rook, and if knight takes, rook to f8 check, king to g7, knight to f5 check. So he could grab the bishop, but knight to f5 check is much stronger because black is already in a forced mate. King to g6, rook to f6 check, king to h5 forced, king to g3, looking for rook to h6 mate. g4, the only move that prevents that. Knight to g7 check, king to g5, bishop to c1, looking to mates with the bishop. Then the only move to prevent that, well, let's say if a5 is played, checkmate with d3, or knight to e6 to prevent that, d3 check, knight blocks, bishop takes knight checkmate. So we can see that black is in a lot of trouble because my pieces are very active at this point and his pieces haven't developed. If g5 is played, knight takes pawn, and if not, knight takes knight is played, but b5, let's say a random move, I could grab the rook, but even better would be to grab the knight, pawn recaptures, rook to f8 check, attacking the bishop, king moves, I grab the bishop. Now the knight can no longer move because I can grab the rook. Black can grab my knight, and after bishop to d6, so we can see we have a black squared bishop. We can see that we can exchange all of our pieces against black pieces and have one minor piece left. So let's say a5, rook takes, rook recaptures, bishop takes, and black is left with the last game. So we can now see that after our attacking move, knight to d7, attacking the pawn on c7, that black cannot ignore this threat and continue with his own attacking idea of advancing the pawns. So black plays knight to a6 instead, developing a knight and adding protection to the c7 square. I continue with bishop to e7, check with a fork, but this is now protected. King to h8, d4. So the point now is to get rid of the knight on e6. And if this knight is gone, of course, we can get a checkmate. h6 is played to create an escape square. I continue with the attack. d5. Knight moves out of the way, also blocking my bishop on a3. Rook to f8 check. King to h7. So black uses his escape square. Knight to h to g6, looking for a mate with rook on h8. Of course, the knight cannot be recaptured because it is protected, and there's nothing black can do against this, and black decides to resign the game. So that was a game using the 3-pawn gambit of the Cunningham Defense. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and perhaps you should give it a try in some of your own games. Thanks for watching, and have a great evening. I play b5, and now it becomes difficult for white to find a good attacking move, because he has developed in order to attack my king, but now that's no longer possible, and he's getting behind in development.